Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike here, back in the aquarium lab. Don't have the lab coat on today, even though we are still doing something fairly scientific, a little bit. It's way too hot out here right now, but today we are going to be talking about growing plants immersed and how you can create your own little, very simple, do-it-yourself immersed growth setup. And so I know a lot of you guys have probably, seen it a million times how to do this. My method's very simplified. We'll also talk about how you can do it at a little bit of a higher level or just a different way to do it. But basically, the important thing that we're going to be talking about as we make this is how this can be really useful. And so it's not just for getting plants in and growing them, to large quantities in that immersed state. We'll talk about how that works too, just in case you're unfamiliar. But there are a couple different reasons why this is really handy, and I'll talk about a situation where it worked out really well for me. But let's go ahead and talk about this dwarf hairgrass here. So this is a plant that I've had for a long time, and it's been growing immersed in my little setup here for about 2 months. And so when I put this plant in, it was a lot smaller. I'll find some video where you can see how it looked when I put it into this tub. And now you can see 2 months later, there's a ton of it here. So why did I choose to grow the dwarf hairgrass immersed like this? Well, it's because over in one of my tanks, it was covered in algae. And rather than fix it in a different way, I decided to just physically remove the plant and grow it immersed as a way to get rid of that algae. It works very well and it's easy to do. So you can see here, this dwarf hairgrass is looking fantastic. It's perfect. I could put it back in that tank, or what I am gonna do is use this and put it into one of my new tanks that I'm gonna be setting up. My 33 long needs some dwarf hairgrass, and here I have a ton of it. So not only did I save the plant from basically getting covered in algae, not growing, potentially dying back, now I have a ton of it that I can use for my new setup. And as you can tell from comparing it to that earlier footage, there's a lot more of it here now than there was before. So now I'm in a little bit of a different situation, but I still want to try and grow some foreground plants immersed. And so here we have some Stigma, and this is a portion cup of some that I got in like a week ago. And I accidentally got it in a little bit too soon. I had a setback with the tank that I want to put it in. And so rather than, float this stuff, have it spread out, get everywhere, my other option, because I can't set it up yet and, put it into the tank, I'm gonna try and save it and grow it out in an immersed tub. So let's go ahead and make one of these. It's super simple. Here we just have a Tupperware tub. It's, I don't know what, it's like a foot long and what is that, like 5 inches tall? So it doesn't really matter. Having a little bit of height is nice. So all you need is one of these. You of course need your plants, which we're going to be using this Stigma, these few cups that I have. And then you need some substrate. So for that, we're going to be using some earthworm castings. You can use potting soil, you could use, whatever aquarium nutrient substrate you have. You just want to have something with some nutrients. There's not, a lot of rules here to what you can and can't use, but we're going to go ahead and use the earthworm castings because if you've been following along, you know that I am really, really into that stuff. And a video about why is coming super soon. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and add this to our tub. We're just gonna pour in some earthworm castings, and it doesn't really matter, how much you put in. That's probably good. Just a few cups for this tub at least. We want to have, something like an inch. I'd say at least an inch of soil or whatever substrate you're going to be using. So I'm just going to go ahead and break this stuff up because there's some big clumps in here. And then we're going to wet it down. So for that, I have just this little spray bottle thing here. I don't want to spray the camera, but you can spray your stuff down. Get that soil or that substrate or whatever you're using nice and damp, because we want to have basically as much moisture in here as possible. And you'll see how we lock it in a second. So I'm just going to go through here and spray this stuff down, mix it around a little bit with my hands, and get it totally soaked up. And I think I'm actually going to add a little bit more because that didn't end up being exactly what I wanted. You can't add too much, Like I said before, there's really no rules when it comes to this. You can't do it wrong. Now that I have all the soil that I want in, I go ahead and just pack it down lightly just to get a consistently, sort of flat layer in the top. And then we're gonna go ahead and plant. But first, I'm gonna wash my hands to make this a little bit easier. All right, so I have some planting forceps here. You can use whatever you want, it doesn't matter, but using your finger can be tough, especially with really delicate foreground plants like this Stigma. So we have a cup here. You can see that this stuff is not in the hottest condition. It's looking pretty beat up. Again, you know, it just happens, timing was bad, and so rather than let this stuff just melt out or have to float it in a tank and have it get everywhere, we're gonna try this and see how well it works. So all I'm gonna do is go through here and try and pick out some of the better looking stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna be too selective here. There aren't any roots on this. This is just portions of Glosso. And so we're just gonna go ahead and put it in our tub and stick it down into the substrate, into our earthworm castings. And I'm not really thinking even that much about, you know, where I'm placing it or how I'm placing it. I'm just taking out, you know, little portions and sticking it down in here. This stuff is a creeping kind of a plant, and so we don't need to have the whole portion, you know, down in there. It's hard to tell, you know, what side is really the rooting side, but it doesn't matter because it'll just root from any sides that are near the soil. Even the parts that aren't directly in the soil are gonna send out roots to go get down in there and start to grow out all over the place. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get my other cups and plant some more of this stuff. I'm trying to select out the cups that look like they have the best looking plants, you know, because I don't wanna put anything that looks like it can't come back from the dead. But I think this stuff is gonna bounce back pretty well. Once I have everything that I want in the tub, now I'm going to go ahead and spray it down a couple more times to help get all the soil in the right place and get the plants seeded in their new little home. We're going to go ahead and give the foliage one last spray, get it nice and wet in there, and then we're going to be covering this tub with some plastic wrap, cling wrap, saran wrap, whatever you want to call it. So this is going to lock in the moisture and basically keep our plants from drying out, because that's the last thing that you want to have happen. That'll definitely kill them off. Once our tub is wrapped up, now we need to give it a light source. So for me, like what I did with the hair grass, was I just put it by a window. And so this is the simplest way to do it, and it requires not having to have an extra light around, but you can also just set this thing with an LED over the top. No problem, it's gonna do the same thing. When you're doing immersed stuff like this, you can run the light, if you're using an artificial light, you can run it for like 18 hours a day and there's gonna be no harm to anything. You know, you can't promote algae growth, and the plants can take it and they're actually gonna do better in that situation. So you can actually do this exact same thing in a tank, and that's actually one of the things that we're gonna be doing when we set up the 33-gallon long tank. We're gonna be putting the plants in the aquarium and then covering the aquarium with saran wrap and doing an immersed grow out to help promote root growth and get things started a lot faster and give those plants a much better chance at taking hold and growing really good in the aquarium once we fill it with water. So that's another thing. The immersed setup is a good option for people that really like tissue culture plants. I'm sure if you've bought a lot of tissue culture plants before, you know that a lot of times you get them in, you put them straight into your aquarium and they just melt. And that's because they've been living in a nutrient-rich agar in, you know, air. And then you take them out of a nutrient-rich agar and you put them into an aquarium where they, you know, might not have a lot of CO2. They definitely don't have as much CO2 as they had before, and you can see how that change in environment can shock a plant and could very well kill it. A lot of really skilled aquascapers take advantage of growing plants immersed at the beginning, and especially, you know, these foreground plants that are really hard to grow. Dwarf baby tears, you know, even dwarf hair grass, Glosso, the list goes on. I mean, you could name at least 10 to 15 plants where doing an immersed setup would give you a lot better chance of having a successful foreground in your aquarium if you were to do that. So all we need to do now is go and put this over on the window. I'll take you guys over there, and this is going to take a while for this plant to work. So the timing of this isn't really ideal for what we're going to be doing over in the 33, because that's going to start here pretty soon. So I will just be getting some new Glosso, but we're going to do the same thing in that aquarium to start it. I just wanted to give you guys a little example of how you can do this on your own. Maybe if you need to save some plants that are going through, you know, an algae outbreak and you don't want to deal with the tank, or maybe you're taking the tank down and you don't have a place to put your plants in the meantime while you set up or get ready to set up a new aquarium. So anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Maybe you know, you're in a position where this was something that's going to help you out. I really hope that that it works out for you. Don't forget to check out Aqua Pro's t-shirts. There's a link down in the description. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you're excited for the new tank builds because they're coming really soon and I need to set these things up. I literally can't wait. So thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.